Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live. So it's great to be here. Loads of people, loads of questions. So I'll try and get into the questions as quickly as possible so I can make sure that I can get to as many questions. Looks like it's going to be a busy question day. So I'm Gary Bembridge, of course, and the channel's Tips for Travelers. What else can I say? If you're here live, write the word question before your questions. So I'll make sure that I know it's a question, not a chat. If you're watching this afterwards, thanks very much. And I bring up the questions. So if you want to sort of skip through the questions, you can do that. I don't add chapters in, it's too time consuming to do that. So let me think a bit of housekeeping, other bits and pieces. So let me talk about next week. So I'm heading off, in fact, I'm flying on Thursday to Buenos Aires to join a 31-night cruise around, I guess, 3/4 of South America, ending up in Fort Lauderdale. So it's 31 nights. So that's the stuff you can see up there. And so I will be boarding on Sunday, so a week today. So what I'm planning to do, I'll come back to that in a second, is next Saturday, I'm planning to do a live stream from my hotel in Buenos Aires. It's a very different time though. So it will be 4 o'clock Eastern time, that's 1 o'clock Pacific time, that's 9 p.m. in the UK, and it will be 6 p.m. for me in Buenos Aires. So have a look out for that. If there's any problems with that, I'll post not doing that. I'm also hoping to do some on the ship as well. I'm going to do some Patreon video bits and pieces as well. So what else can I tell you? That's probably all for now. I'll talk about Patreon a little bit later, because when I'm on these cruises, I do some very specific Patreon video updates as well. So I'll talk about Patreon a little bit later. But let's get into the questions, because there's questions about that itinerary, there's questions about why I'm doing it, and blah, blah, blah. So let's get straight into the questions. Very simple one. Cruise for everyone. When do you expect 2028 cruises to be released? In fact, most cruise lines have most of 2028 out. I did a little quick check. Princess, Royal Caribbean, Home America, Cunard, etc. They all have their 2028 cruises. In fact, this week I even saw some cruise lines announcing their 2029 world cruises. I don't think they're on sale yet, but you'll find a lot of 2028 is on sale. Now, I noticed on some cruise lines, not all of their fleet has been announced, as I guess they still get some deployments, but pretty much every cruise line has their 2028 out. I know quite a few people have booked 2028. I haven't got as far as that yet. Patrick Philippe, super luxury ship or upper experience on a more mainstream ship, if the itinerary is good, does it matter? Yes, it makes a huge difference, simply because they are very different experiences. So a luxury ship is a smaller ship, so you're going to have a smaller ship experience. So it's a very different experience to be on a mainstream ship, which is much bigger. So if you're going, I don't know, on Norwegian and you're going in the Haven, or you're going in MSC in the Yacht Club, or even if you're going Celebrity in Retreat, or if you're going Cunard in the Grills or whatever, it's a very different experience, because obviously there's more venues, there's way more people, less personalized service. The food is not necessarily always as good in some of those luxury ships, but certainly entertainment will be much lower key. You won't have as big production shows. You just won't have as much going on. So it's quite a different experience. Also, when it comes to itinerary, there will be some key differences, because the luxury smaller ships on the itinerary are likely to be able to go into either right into the heart of cities, or like Shanghai or Marseille, they'll go right in. The big ships will be way out at the container port or whatever port. Plus it may go to places that the mainstream ship just can't go to because it's too big. So it's a very, very different experience. So I think it does make a massive difference. So a lot of it hinges around obviously what experience you want, and also the itinerary could be very different. So for example, I would definitely look at going through parts of Europe, but certainly parts of Asia, if you can afford it, on a smaller ship, because you actually get into the heart of cities. You know, when we went through Asia, for example, on Queen Mary and stuff, we were miles out in Shanghai. We were miles out, you know, in Ho Chi Minh City, etc. Whereas on smaller ships, you know, you're right in the heart of it. So very different. Hopefully that answers that question. Diabetic, I have no idea on this question. Synthetic dry fit or natural linen or merino, any suggestions for hot and humid weather? I have no idea. I tend to go more kind of natural personally, but I've never thought it through. So if anyone has a better answer based on, I don't know, more facts or studies or something, that would be great. Hetty's here, Lou's here, which is fantastic. Let's have a look. There's a couple of questions on Cunard, so I'll try and pull those up together. I've lost the second one, so maybe I'll do the second Cunard question, or I might just mention it based on what I remember the question being. So, Miguel, a comparison to Cunard, they're fanned on 10 plus cruises versus Holland America versus Princess. Traveling with 3 years old, we appreciate Cunard food, peace, quiet, big show after dinner. Don't want to go on worse. In reality, they are pretty much exactly the same. In reality, they all operate in the same category. They're all in the premium category. So that we've got Cunard, Holland America, Princess, Virgin Voyages, and Disney actually are all. Sorry, I'm choking away. So they all operate in the same category. The ships are sort of the same sort of size, 2,000 upwards. They have very similar experiences. They have very similar, they have lots going on, the big shows and so on. What is different, what Cunard do that's different to the others is, first of all, Cunard is obviously way more focused on a couple of things. First of all, they are way more focused on enrichment. So you will get much better enrichment. You don't mention that as being an issue there. But enrichment is in another league to the others because you have normally your 4 speakers, 1 celebrity speaker of some kind, politician, actor, whatever. They will also obviously have a bigger live band doing the ballroom dancing with a sort of an orchestra, much more focused on that side. And of course, they do the big afternoon tea kind of thing. And they are much more into the dressing up. So of course, the dress code has been relaxed more. So on gala nights, it's recommended now, not required. So you could actually go on formal night into the main dining rooms in a collared shirt and chinos if you wanted to. Most people don't, but you can do. So those are kind of the key differences. And it tends to be an older crowd, generally speaking. Holland America and Princess, they are not quite as enrichment focused, but certainly you'll find if you're looking for the peace and quiet, Holland America is probably the quietest of all of those. Tends to be a little bit more coupley, but in peak times, they will get a lot of families on board, particularly in Alaska. They have quite a big kids club, actually much bigger kids clubs and much bigger kids programs than Cunard do. So particularly if you're with your 3-year-old looking for more kid stuff, Holland American Princess have much bigger programs for kids. Food is very similar, unless you're traveling in the grills, where food is elevated above those two. But if you're in Britannia, the food is basically the same. It's very similar. So a lot of it hinges a little bit around the program. Princess has a much bigger program. So if you're looking for peace, quiet, Princess have so much more going on, and it's a little bit more loud because they have the big atrium, which has much more stuff going on. It's much more buzzy, much more vibrant. So Holland America would be a good alternative. Holland America passengers will probably be about as negative as you'll find about you traveling with a 3-year-old as on Cunard, because as you know, a lot of those are expecting a more adult experience, and of course it's not an adult experience. There was another question on Holland America, on Cunard. Let me do that one as well. Another question from Patrick. I've not been on Cunard since way before COVID, so I'm curious, is it true that Cunard now dropped down to mainstream line or one step up? Patrick, Cunard have never been a luxury line, ever. They advertise that they're a luxury line, but they are not a luxury line. Cunard is, without any shadow of a doubt, a premium line, the same as Holland America Princess. It is not superior to those. Now, if you are traveling in the grills, that is elevated. Certainly the food is elevated, the amount of service you get is elevated, you have butlers, that kind of stuff if you're in Queen's Grill. That little enclave part of it is elevated above the others. But if you're just traveling in Cunard mainstream, Britannia, it is not a luxury line. It is a mainstream premium line. And a lot of people get, if you look at a lot of the complaints or questions with Cunard is people expect from their advertising to be an extremely luxurious line. They go on and they go, hang on a minute, this is like my Holland America or my Princess. So they haven't really changed a lot. Their advertising changed. They are charging for more things, so for example, room service after, I think it's 10 now, if you're in Britannia, you get charged for that kind of stuff. But they certainly haven't gone up, but they are kind of what they are, a mainstream. So it's more premium. Mainstream for me, by the way, is Holland America, is Royal Caribbean, MSC, Norwegian, that, and Carnival. That is kind of mainstream resort line. Then you've got premium, then you've got luxury, small luxury, ultra luxury. Hopefully that makes sense. Cunard people probably hate me for that, but I've done a lot of Cunard cruises and it's definitely not luxury. Grills is more luxurious, definitely. Bravo. Spending 3 days in Tokyo, fabulous. I love Tokyo. If you could spend more, even better. Then 2.5 weeks cruising around Japan. How do you determine how much yen to take with you? Love your content. Thank you. Now, I think someone has answered this question a little bit. I take basically almost no yen. In Japan, it is extremely Apple Card friendly. As someone mentioned, if you've got an Apple phone, if you've got a phone in wallet, if you go to wallet in there, you can go onto there and add the Metro card. So if you're in Tokyo, so you don't even need cash to pay for a card. To buy a travel card thing. So I don't really take yen with me. So on my last 2 trips, I think I've taken, and I've just taken it out the cash machine. I've taken out about £100, so it's about $120, $130 in yen, and I haven't actually used all of it because I've used cards a lot. So, and I think someone had mentioned a fairly similar point to that. Patrick asking, so I'm answering a lot of Patrick's questions, but let me keep doing this since it's in the order there. Do you find yourself as a solo traveler being looked after better on the top tier, super luxury type of cruise lines, or do you find yourself being treated the same, exactly the same? No difference, because they're all about personalizing, getting to know your name. It's not better and it's not worse. It's just kind of what they do. Jeffrey's asking a question sort of linked to, I guess, coming up. A good value place to stay pre-cruise in Buenos Aires. I don't know. I'm actually staying, I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel I've stayed last time after my Holland America trip. I can't remember the name of it. I'm actually staying in the Intercontinental this time, partly because I have status with Intercontinental, which I like to keep. I always get upgrades, late checkouts, although I don't need it on this one, upgrades and stuff. And it's not too crazy expensive, but it's probably not amazing value. So I don't have any good tips. So if people have good tips, Jeffrey, one of the things I often do, what I do when I go to a place, is I tend to default into Intercontinental because of the perks and things. I tend to also look at Marriott if I don't like the Intercontinental. What I like about Marriott is they obviously have quite a wide range. Intercontinental is also quite good because they have everything from Holiday Inn upwards. So you get a good sense, if you look at Intercontinental, you get a sense of the kind of the range, because they'll have Holiday Inn through to all their different brands, and you get a sense of what the different pricing levels are. But they're all within that group, so they're quite good hotels. The same with Marriott, I tend to look at that. So for example, I'm booking some stuff for New Zealand. The reviews for Intercontinental and their hotels weren't very good, but the reviews for Marriott were better. But everyone has a better suggestion than I do. Love to see that. Now, this next one I will bring up, but I don't think I can answer this because it's just pure speculation. But Rashika, we're on a region cruise in April. One of the ports is Alexandria, and we will disembark in Istanbul. With these ports so close to the conflict zone, do you think the itinerary change? It's just way too early to have any view on that. So we will obviously keep an eye. The main risk at the moment is really within the Middle East. So, it's more affecting that area, between Iran and sort of the rest of the mainland there, which of course is going through quite a scary time at the moment. Missiles and all that stuff still going around. So of course all flights have stopped. A couple of cruise lines, of course, have cancelled cruises in the Middle East. But that's sort of the other side. So it's pure speculation. So I will probably leave it as that. Linneo, wishing me bon voyage. Thank you very much. And let's have a look. Oh, Diabetic mentioning the same thing around the yen point. Paul and Carol here, good to see you here. Paul and Carol, of course, they're just back from their 52-night Nordam cruise. They just started posting some of the videos around that. First one of which came out yesterday, it was the day before, which is talking about they did their cruise on an inside cabin, and it's around whether it was a good idea or a bad idea for such a long cruise. So good to see you here. What am I most looking forward to about my upcoming South America cruise? Can I be a bit naughty and mention more than one? Probably one of the things I'm most looking forward to is I'm doing a off-ship excursion to Machu Picchu. And that is what the ship, when it gets to Lima, well, it's the port for Lima, it's going to be there for a couple of nights. I think it's for 3 nights, 3 days. Anyway, it's there for 3 days, 2 nights, I think it is. And I've booked through Holland America a extension, which involves us flying to Cusco, doing some sightseeing, staying in the hotel there, and then getting the Hiram Bingham train, which is a very classic, very swanky sort of, it's a bit like some of the UK Pullman type trains. We get the train up to the I've forgotten the name of the train station, and then you have to bus up to Machu Picchu. We then see Machu Picchu, come back, and that night we get the train back, spend the night again, and then fly back and catch the ship. So I'm really, really looking forward to Machu Picchu and that off-ship extension. Secondly, I'm really looking forward to, there's quite a few of those ports I haven't been to before. The first probably half of it I've been to those ports before, because I've sort of done that itinerary in the different order. So I'm doing some slightly different things in those ports. But there's other ports I've got lots of very quite exciting excursions. Third thing I'm looking at is just being back on Holland America for an extended period of time. I really always have a good time on Holland America. I've been on Amsterdam before. It's had some updates then. And as you know, you've just been on Holland America. Really looking forward to that. And of course, it's been a long time since we've done such a long month-long cruise. So I'm really looking forward to that. Let's have a look. Jeffrey Cruising for One is here. Tom, good to see you here, Tom. So I hope all is going well. Obviously being affected by all the hullabaloo going on. Your next cruise contains Drake. Actually, it's not actually containing Drake's package, because I'm not, the cruise I'm doing isn't doing the one where it does scenic sailing of the down to Antarctica. So it actually, I'll just bring that up quickly. Let me just bring that up again. Whoops. So we're not going down doing the scenic cruising, but it does going round Cape Horn. So it's sort of coming through the top of that, the slightly sort of bumpy part of the world, as it were. Let me go. Oh, I've gone and lost the question. Here we go. On a prior video on a similar reverse itinerary, you say you not do it again. Did the Panama Canal Traverse change your outlook? So very good, well spotted. So it's good to know that you've watched my video. So I made a video, as Tom said, about South America when I did it a couple of years ago. And I said at the end of it, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't think I would do it again. So you're absolutely right. I actually watched a video the other day to remind myself of my tips. And when I saw it, I was actually quite surprised I'd said that, because actually the more I thought about it, the more I've always wanted to do a circumnavigation. And this itinerary really appealed, because there was quite a few ports that with hindsight, I did want to go back to and do slightly different things. And that second half, as I mentioned earlier, is lots of stuff that I want to do. So hopefully we'll get into the Falklands. It's really 50-50 to get in. I want to go and see a different part of Penguin there. So it wasn't so much the Panama Canal Traverse that changed my outlook. It was a couple of years ago when I really thought about, I want to just actually go back to South America again, spend a bit more time there. And it's sort of like on my bucket list to circumnavigate. I know I'm not completely circumnavigating. Plus the big plus, this includes Panama Canal. So it'll be my 6th time going through Panama Canal, which I'm very excited about as well. So hopefully that kind of answers that. Lou's saying, have a great cruise on South America. Tom, so actually it's good to see, Tom, that you're actually on Facebook. As you know, I live stream this also across on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Now, I actually got a message just before I went live when I posted something that it wasn't going on Facebook. So I deleted and I re-put it up. So maybe like 10 minutes before the started. So it's good to know that it's working on Facebook. Kathy Chatty Cruises is here, which is also great. Leslie. Now, I think, Leslie, did you leave a message saying this is the first time you've been on a live cruise, live chat? I think I sort of see a question. I think it was from you. If you are, welcome. Hopefully it won't be your last. How do you feel about the incessant upselling on the more mainstream and premium lines like Princess, Royal Caribbean? Leslie, it's interesting because it actually doesn't massively bother me, but maybe because I'm always quite clear about what I do and don't want to do. And I do, so I maybe become a little bit I've managed to shut it out a bit. And I'm always very clear about which I want to buy and what I don't want to buy. And I've done it before I go on. But you're right, I find it more in your face, if that's the right, when I'm on things like Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, MSC. So that's sort of like mainstream kind of lines. It's a little bit more subtle, I guess, on Princess, but it doesn't drive me completely crazy, but I know it does drive a lot of people really crazy. But maybe it's just because I'm really clear about what it is that I'm going to buy. I bought it and I can sort of brush it off. I don't know. I built my defense mechanisms in, but I think it's not going to go away even with the introduction of the packages. They still are not only trying to sell you packages, but selling you other things. So I think it's what's interesting is, for cruise lines, this is a massive part of their profits. I follow the cruise lines when they do their financial statements every quarter, and they talk obviously about load factors, which are generally over 100% at the moment, because they're obviously getting lots of families sailing, so cabin sharing is up, and fares are up, but they do talk about just how much and how significant the onboard spend is to their profitability. So that's interesting. So it doesn't bother, maybe it should bother me more. I don't know. Francis, I'm going on a Holland America 14-day Circle Japan cruise next March. Fabulous. If I only have time to see one, or I guess you were saying one or two things in Tokyo, what should I see? Wow, that's quite challenging. Francis, probably it depends a little bit on what your big interests are. I would say that the National Museum gives you pretty good insight into Japanese culture and lifestyle, and it's not very expensive to get into. What I would do if you do go is check what special exhibitions there are, because sometimes they sell out very early, so it's worth kind of booking. If you want to do something more touristic, it's always, of course, great to go to Shibuya Crossing, the famous crossing, which is really packed, and around there's quite kind of interesting. It's a little bit touristy and so on, and you can go up the tall building next door and get a good view of it. But if you're going to do one thing, I would probably go that more cultural way, because it's going to give you more of an insight. But I do have, Francis, which I will link to in here to make it easier for you. I will leave a link, so maybe 5-10 minutes after this. What I did for Tokyo, and in fact for all my stops, is I made these very short little shorts. These are like 60-second things. Some of them are short, 60 seconds, suggesting. So in Tokyo, I cover all the things that I think you should do in Tokyo. And I've actually just changed my mind on what you should do. I think you should probably go to the Sensoji temple, because that's just so iconic. And if you don't go, you'll probably kick yourself. So if you're going to do two things, I would go to the Sensoji temple. You'll recognize it immediately. It's the one with the big kind of bell dome-y thing. It looks very old. It was actually built after the Second World War because it was damaged. So Sensoji is probably where I'd go, but I'll put that link. It's very quick to watch of all the things to do, but probably Sensoji is probably what you should do, and then the museum, so you get a kind of culturally side. Christine, fantastic to see you here. Let's have a look. Claudia's here. Gosh, lots of people here, which is great. Sky Tower is great. I agree. Sky Tower is fantastic. Kathy was saying. Signal Corps is asking the best way to book solo cruises. I have a video around solo cruising, so I won't spend a lot of time on it here because I have touched on it before. I actually have another video coming out soon. I'm just actually editing the script down. It's too long at the moment. We look at it. So I will put a link to the existing one on my solo cruise. So about 5-10 minutes after this, because it's quite a complicated thing to do. So I'll watch that rather than cover that here. Question on Zeddam. Yes, I'm just back from my group cruise on Zeddam, which I loved. I had a great time. Some people had problems at the back cabins, some problems with the aircon and hot water at one point of time. But I really liked it. I thought my cabin was great. I had great food. I really liked it. So I certainly, based on my experience, I mean, the cabins I think are still a little bit dated. My cabin wasn't, because I've refreshed some, haven't refreshed one. My sister's cabin that I saw was probably a bit more dated. So there we, so that's so I liked it, and I think most of the people on the group cruise liked it. A few didn't because they had those problems at the rear of the ship. Mick Gold, do you have any thoughts on which river cruise line might be best for a first-time river cruise? We've taken several ocean cruises and would like to try river cruises. So Mick, I'm assuming you're talking European river cruising. So I'll work on that assumption for now. So Mick, a little bit depends on what your budget is, to be honest, because there is quite a wide range of cruise, river cruise lines as there are ocean cruise lines. So, and they all pretty much do the same itinerary, and they all pretty much go to the same places, and they all pretty much do the same excursions. So a lot of the difference is then about the onboard experience. Now the ships themselves are basically the same length, the same width, because they have to be, with one exception with Ama Magna, which is a double-sized one on the Danube. So I'm not sure that there's anyone that's particularly good as a first timer. So a lot of it depends on the budget, but I'm going to mention a couple that I would certainly encourage you to take a look at. So let's start at the top, if you like. So right at the top, you've got your sort of ultra luxury lines, which is things like Riverside, Uniworld. They are pretty expensive. They are the most all-inclusive of all of them. River cruise fares tend to be quite all-inclusive, but they are the most all-inclusive. They're the most pampered. They have the biggest cabins. Uniworld being quite blingy. Riverside bought the old Crystal River cruise ships. Then you've got your sort of more luxury side, which my favorites in there is Ama Waterways. I really like Ama Waterways. They have very nice ships which have a half, you have sort of a half balcony, half sort of just a Juliet balcony thing, quite good sized cabins, really not good food, big focus on wellness. They have a fitness kind of wellness person on board. They're pretty good. Then you've got this, you got your sort of more sort of, I guess, your 4-stars. You've got things like Viking, Avalon. I really like Avalon. Is a good one to look at. Again, it's not crazy pricing. They're very good for, they do a lot of solo deals. Again, a little bit more active. They're trying to have more active excursions. Pretty good food, fairly good from a wellness perspective. You've also got Tauk. So Tauk is probably one of the most popular lines, particularly amongst US travelers, because of course their experience with escorted traveling and their reputation. And they are very highly rated as well. Sold out a lot. Then once you get into more value lines, you're talking about things like Viva, TUI, Riviera, those sort of lines. So they are a little bit on the value side. And Crossy Europe, which is a French line, also has quite a lot of English speakers, but it's more uncertain whether you'll get English speakers on that. So a lot of it hinges around your sort of budget and experience that you want in terms of quality of food and so on. The places you call the excursions would largely be the same because they're all calling it the same at the same places. Let's have a look. Sheila, has a question around waitlisting on luxury ships. We're interested in a January 2027 Regent cruise, but the type of suite that we're interested is waitlisted. Now, I haven't any direct experience, Sheila, of waitlisting because I tend not to book a waitlisted cabin, largely because I book way in advance and I'd like to know what cabin I've got. So I don't have any personal experience. Now, what I would say, though, is, of course, the critical time period, so January, December, November, October. You're probably not going to get a good read until about 90 days before, because that's when people have to pay the final balance. That's when you'll get a shakeout from the wait list and stuff appearing. But certainly I haven't seen a lot of stuff opening, but I haven't really tracked it that much. But I would say, you're not going to really, you're unlikely to, the good news is you will know 3 months before, because that's when, if people are going to drop out, they're going to drop out. Obviously, there may be the odd cancellation for other reasons, but the big financial commitment is 90 days before. So that's if you're happy to hang on and wait till then, that I would say is the critical time period. Boys and Boca, good to see you here. How do you see Norwegian Cruise Line recent issues affecting Regent Oceania? What's our experience? New CEO has chosen to use acquisition expertise, perhaps offloading new builds. So let's give a bit of context for that. For those who don't know about that, is Norwegian Cruise Lines, there's actually two key developments, both of which are likely to have an impact. One of which is they recently, Larry Summers, who was the CEO, abruptly disappeared and was replaced by a new CEO, whose name I forget, who was on the board of Norwegian, but his background was most recently from Subway and before that Burger King. So no kind of direct cruise experience other than sort of being on the board of, he had been on the board. Now, second to that is the private equity firm, oh my goodness, I've got, it'll come to me in a second, I'll keep talking about them. So they are kind of activist private equity. They're renowned for taking holdings in companies. They've done it with Southwest Airlines, they've done it with Disney, they've done it now with Norwegian. They've bought a massive big chunk of Norwegian stock, 10%, if I remember correctly. And their argument is that Norwegian is extremely underperforming and needs to get its act together. They argue that their share price is half what it should be versus the other lines. And they're asking for a massive shakeup of management. They want more management with cruise experience, and they want more people with cruise experience on the board. They have sort of a person who used to run Royal Caribbean a couple of years ago, is they're angling for him to be on the board. And they're talking about quite a big shakeup. So I think we're going to see quite an interesting coming, and who knows where it's going to head out. So I would be more surprised on the new builds, but you're right, they have announced a lot of new builds. Some very recently, just in the last week or two, they've announced a lot of new builds. They have a lot of new builds across all three brands. They've announced more builds across the three brands. I would be surprised, but it's just my guess, about offloading new builds, because increasing capacity, there's a strong case to be making for capacity. I mean, the strangest thing is that Carnival don't have more new builds. So I would be surprised, I think, particularly with Oceania, because they clearly are going to ditch their R-class ships. They got agreements to ditch two of them. One of that fell through. So they're getting rid of old ships and replacing them with new ships. So Regent does feel like expanding very fast, to your point. So I would be surprised if they do that. I hadn't seen the news about the acquisition stuff. That almost implies the other way around, that he's going to be buying more stuff. But I think it's going to be very interesting, because you're right. When he first came in, it sounded like he was being brought in to kind of tighten up things. Would there be cost cutting? Would there be pulling back on services? There was quite a few articles. In fact, there was an article in it was a Wall Street Journal I read about talking about how the big risk that they had is taking stuff out of region, a bit like Royal Caribbean did a little bit with Silversea, where they took stuff back. So they were talking about being an all-inclusive line, but they're not all-inclusive because they've taken excursions, they've taken this out, they've taken that out. And arguing that region at the moment has this all-inclusive story, but if you start to pull stuff out, you're not really all-inclusive. So worrying that there was going to be more of that kind of cutting and nickel and diming and stuff. So I think it's going to be very interesting over the next few months to see what happens and see whether the activists have their way. But certainly, I think we're going to see a lot of shake-up in Norwegian. So I'm not sure I've answered your question. So sorry about that if I haven't. Someone asking about you do not need yellow fever shots to get into South Africa. But unless you have called into ports before you get there that require yellow fever vaccines. So actually, in reality, one of the reasons that I didn't go on my Regent trip which went from Barcelona down to Cape Town is according to 2 countries which required a yellow fever shot, which my oncologist was absolutely adamant I shouldn't have. Also in the UK, if you're over a certain age, they're not very keen on it. But also one of the rules in South Africa was there was a risk that you would not be allowed to disembark without having a yellow fever vaccine. Now, there was an exception to that, so probably unlikely. But if you're just going to South Africa, you won't need it. But if you are calling in those 2 ports. Now, what's very interesting is I've noticed both with Regent, Oceania, Viking, a few other people that are doing that West Africa, that they seem to have all dropped the 2 countries that needed the yellow fever vaccine, because of course many of their passengers are sort of over 65. Big push against having the yellow fever vaccine amongst a lot of medical professionals. So it's interesting. I noticed as I was looking at because I would still like to do that West Africa itinerary, that those 2 countries have been dropped. So that's very interesting. But I looked at that in quite a lot. Kathy, going on Viking Danube cruise in June. Nice. Any must-dos in Budapest? We are there overnight before disembarking. So yeah, one of the things to do, and I'm going to get the names of these wrong, I suspect, but and I always forget which is the Buddha side and which is the Pest side. So, and I can't remember which way around it is, but you're docked on one side. So basically, one of the absolute must-dos, if you haven't done it as part of the tour, is you want to go right up the hill. You'll see it when you moored. You'll see pictures. You've got cruise ships moored on the one side. By the way, there's a very nice market just the other side there, which you should go to, which you can walk to. Really nice market, food and knickknacks and all that sort of stuff. So make sure you go to the market, which is within walking distance of that. But then make sure you go up the hill, because at the top of the hill, you've got not only incredible views, you've got an amazing church. There's the old castle and really interesting shops up there. You definitely want to go up there. That's an absolute must do. Also, you want to go down the river. You've got this very moving sculptural thing of these shoes, which is all linked to the Nazi time and stuff. A very interesting story around that. It's very moving. There's a few other things. There's some quite interesting things. If you won't have that much time, but there's some quite interesting museums all linked to the time when it was under communist rule with the Stasi and stuff like that. If you're really into that sort of war and Cold War and communist time history, that's there as well. Also, one of the things I did do, but I haven't done for a very long time, is a lot of the communist statues were moved into like a statue park. Rather than destroy them, they moved them, and that's quite interesting to do, but that's probably further down the list. I would go to the market, go up the hill, get the great views, and so on. Greg has a question about the Viking Egyptian river cruise. Any recommendation on a hotel for pre-trip stay? So Greg, I'm surprised because normally Viking would sell a package which as part of this would include the hotel, because normally when you book the Nile River cruise, they have a period of time in Cairo, and then they take you en masse down to Luxor to join the ship. So, and they use the Four Seasons. There's 2 Four Seasons in Cairo. There's the one which they use, which is more on the river, which is actually a nicer one than I stayed at going on Amma Waterways. So so that the Four Seasons is the choice that most river cruise lines have. You know, it's not as crazy expensive as normally Four Seasons are, but certainly the Four Seasons is right on the river. I don't know, can't remember the name of it, but that's definitely a much nicer Four Seasons than the one that I stayed at, which Amma Water I used. But I'm surprised because normally it's all part of a package and you're very much in a bubble. And if they do offer that as a bubble, I would encourage you to do it all within Viking as a bubble, just from a you know, safety, security, confidence kind of perspective would be my way. Lots of discussion about the wool and the merino stuff, which I will keep an eye on. Someone asking about a rumor that they've changed the drink package. I haven't seen any of that on Norwegian. Avalia Palace, thank you. That's where I did stay. Avalia Palace, thank you very much. I find that. So someone's asked a question about Buenos Aires. It was Avalia Palace where I stayed last time after my cruise at in Buenos Aires. I agree, it's a great, really great, a really great place. There's another question. We're also cruising Venice and Adriatic on Viking Star in April 2027. Suggestions as to ship excursions versus Viator, shore excursions group, or tours by local. So I would obviously start, Leslie, by looking at your Viking, because obviously they're going to give you one included excursion in most of the ports. Now I've done that route, and I remember not even doing many of the included excursions because they were not terribly exciting. And I'd been to some of the ports before, so they were kind of walking tours. But I would look at those because in some of the places, like if you're going to Dubrovnik or you're going to Kotor, you know, some of the walking tours are pretty good because you're exploring the old city and stuff, but may not go far enough. Like you know, Dubrovnik, you want to really walk around the walls. In Kotor, if you fit, you really want to hike up the mountain at the back and get the great views and so on. So I'd look at those first. So in terms of Viator, shore excursions, tour by locals, venture ashore, they're all pretty good. I tend to use shore excursions group a little bit more. By the way, if you do use shore excursions group at the checkout, it's not very obvious, but if you use the code TFT5, so TFT5, you will get 5% discount. And even if they're running a promotion, still put that code in because they give you a discount on top of the discount. I like Shore Excursions Group and Venture Shore because they are very focused on cruise excursions. So both with those, as you probably know, you can put in your cruise line, so you put in Viking, Viking Star, the date in April, and it will then bring up all of the ports and tell you what they've got in those ports. It's quite a nice way of comparing to what Viking are doing. Tours by locals, a lot of people love because, of course, it often tends to be more independent, private people running tours rather than more kind of groups. But don't forget about that code. Wow, lots of tips and advice around the clothing. Randy, good to see you there. Do you know who will be the speakers on the Cunard Transatlantic cruise you'll be on in June? I don't, Randy, and I haven't actually looked yet. It tends to be relatively difficult to find out who they are, but they normally do post them on the Cunard site, but I haven't looked. But it tends to be a little bit closer to the cruise, but I haven't looked. There's a small chance it's on there, but they may be. I forgot that we're going to be seeing you on that, so that's very exciting. I'm debating about whether I should talk about something else to do with transatlantics. Maybe I'll come to that a little bit later, because my next group cruise in 2027 is a Cunard transatlantic cruise, which I will maybe talk about a little bit at the end of this live stream. I was going to talk about it more next week, but spoiler alert, in 2027, my group cruise is going to be a Cunard transatlantic cruise. So there you are. I'll talk about a little bit more about that later and the timescales and when it is, etc. Let's have a look. There's nothing to make about a train battery. Well, if you look up, Paul was saying there's nothing to make about a train. There's 2 trains that go up to Machu Picchu. If you look at the Hiram-Bingham train, I think you'll have quite a different perspective. It is pretty smart. It's very oldie worldy kind of stuff. So, but have a look at that. But you're right. But I'll be disappointed if it's not because it's quite expensive and it looks really amazing. You have brunch and like waiter served breakfast, somebody served dinner, and it all sounds very lovely. Anthony, Regarding videos, do you prefer the Insta360 or the GoPro? So for videos, neither of those would be my short answer. When I'm making videos, the go-to for me is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. So that is I don't have it here, it's in my other room, but basically it's a very small camera. It has a gimbal, it shoots very high quality, 4K, very good at low light. And it's literally like a long, thin thing, and because it's got a gimbal, it has incredibly good movement. So it takes movement out. So even if you're bouncing up and down on a boat, it will completely hold the horizon. It's fantastic. So the Insta360, so GoPro, so that's we now go to the Osmo, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. Now, there's supposedly a 4 coming up, but the 3 is the one to go for. That's become certainly many cruise vloggers across all sorts of categories, not just travel, use that as their camera. In terms of GoPro, I have moved from a GoPro to also another DJI product, which is called a DJI Action 6. That's what I now use for snorkeling underwater. It also is pretty good for videoing, but again, and it's got quite good image stabilization. So I've ditched GoPro for my underwater stuff. The Insta360 is great for those special effects, but it's not good for making regular videos. It's a lot of editing to get it done. So the sort of, and Paul and Carol who are on here, they use it quite a lot as well. It's good for if you want to get drone-like effects, or you want to sort of put it over your shoulders, so you're walking along, so it's looking sort of behind kind of stuff. So it's good for almost like special effect stuff. So hopefully that answers your question. Jim and Cami are here, which is great. We met ages ago, and it seems like an eternity ago, pre-pandemic 2019. The planning a Greek island cruise, oh, very nice, 2 to 3 weeks. Other than Celestial, do you know of any lesser known Greek island cruise lines? No. Celestial is the one. I'm sure there are some very small independent ones, possibly, but no, I don't know of others. I mean, obviously some of the mainstream lines, Holland America have ships down there, Princess, Celebrity has a ship down there as well, based out of Athens as well. But if you're looking for a kind of a slightly smaller ship, no, I don't. If anyone has any other brainwave, that would be great. Good to see you here. Steve is asking the question about how do Hurtigruten to Norway cruises with multiple stops differ from the standard lines? Can you get off the ship at each port? So for those who don't know, what happens is Hurtigruten will stop every couple of hours at all the different ports. You could theoretically get off very quickly, but they may be only for 15 or 20 minutes at some of these stops. So what normally happens, Steve, is if you're doing it as a cruise and you're doing an excursion, what will happen is you'll get off normally in, say, port A, the ship will leave, might do multiple ports, and then you will pick up the ship further down at the end of the excursion, and it might have done 3 or 4 ports after that. But you're not going to be able to get off and do exploring. You might be able to literally get off for 15 minutes at some of the ports. It doesn't spend a lot of time in the ports. So of course that's very different from standard lines, because standard line will pull into Alisund or Stavanger or wherever, and it'll be there for the day. Hurtigruten keeps moving, and you catch up with the ship. The same for their competitor Havalia is the way they do it as well. Let's have a look. And Miguel, just following on question, I think I will not be going up from Cunard to Holland America or Princess. Say no, Oceania now doesn't accept kids, is correct. Well, you've got a few other options. Obviously, because in the sort of small ship luxury side, you're right, both Oceania and Viking are adult only. There is Azamara, Windstar, for example. The one that I would strongly recommend, though, that you look at is, which is very kid friendly, is Explorer Journeys. So Explorer Journeys is sort of, they see themselves as being more ultra luxury, so you're at the Silver Sea region side, but they're probably in reality a little bit more like luxury side just because of the size of the ship, but they are extremely kids friendly. They with Explorer 3 and onwards, they're doubling the size of the kids club. They have very good kids fares. Sometimes kids setting free, sometimes it's 50%, but it's always much lower. They have lots of cabins with multiple sharing, so ideal for families. And there'll be lots of kids at peak times on board for your kids to mix with. So if you want to go up, I would encourage you to look at Explorer Journeys, because only Silversea region, kids can go on, but they don't have kids clubs, they don't have kids programs. There may be no other kids on board, and the passengers are probably not that welcoming of kids. In reality, you might get a few multi-generational stuff, but generally it's not much. Explorer Journeys is the one to look at. Let's see, Rondo, thank you very much for your wishes. Helen's here, alerted Facebook. That's good to know the Facebook thing is working. Other people suggesting other things like Ponant. Someone asking about Oceania Nautica. I've never found Oceania particularly cold from an air conditioning perspective, so no. I just want to write the word questions, so whoops, so that I don't miss your questions. Lisa, no, you have got a question. You need to write the word question. Have you done totems, bearing, crab fishing, lumberjack, or crab fish excursions in Ketchikan? I have not done crab fishing. I've done the others. Lumberjack show is fantastic, really good fun. Totem pole is quite interesting. Obviously not massively exciting, but quite interesting. Crab fish is always fun. I haven't done crab fishing. So all of those are great excursions. Rhonda asking the question about the pay and use the tips to make up that pay. Okay, so this is a real minefield, and it creates all sorts of issues. But fundamentally, and it differs a little bit by line, but fundamentally what most cruise lines work on, Rhonda, is on the basis that when crews sign up, they are sort of guaranteed a wage, and that wage includes tips. So tips. So they will, if they come on and they're going to get 100, that is made up by wages and tips. So they're kind of guaranteed a wage. So it is true that the tips go to the crew. Obviously, there's a formula for that, but it's not sort of like so they know coming on board a ship, most ships, they're going to get X, and that X is a combination of gratuities and base pay. So they're not really gratuitous, which is why they sort of don't call them tips anymore. They call them service charge, or they call them crew appreciation. That cruise lines don't call them. I still call them gratuities. We also call them gratuities and tips. They're the service charge thing. So pretty much the same, I guess, if you're a waitress or waiter these days. So in the UK, you don't tip anymore. It's all service charge, which I guess they're given a bundle. But that's basically how it works. One of the things that it's hard to fathom out is if a lot of people are taking the added gratuities off, what implication does that have for crew? I have never got a straight answer on that one. Do give me some advice around yet. Always have a sweatery thing with you. Right, so Francis is happy with those ideas. Last 2 days of smell. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know they did a smellish on the thing. Diabetic loves Team Labs. Yeah, so Team Labs is always fun, which is quite fun. Food, yes, food is always a good one. I do not know this at all. If anyone does know the answer to this, in the UK, the passports you can turn around really quickly, and you can do them. They become very fast. I actually managed to do my in, I think it's 2 days. You can do it as fast as 2 to 3 days. Obviously, pay extra for that, but it's really good because they've digitized a lot. But Lou has spoken about it there about 2 weeks or so. So that's great. So thanks for answering that question. Jeff, sailing Silversea Yokohama to Hong Kong. Nice. How many days pre and post cruise? Was thinking 34 in Tokyo and 3 in Hong Kong. I'm suspecting that's 3 to 4 in Tokyo, 3 in Hong Kong. Yeah, absolutely, at least that amount. So if you can spend more time in Tokyo, I would go more the 4 days than the 3 days. If you can spend 5 days, you'll find plenty of things to do in 5 days. Hong Kong, 3 days is probably a good thing. If you want to go to Macau, which is really interesting. You can get the little ferry, you can go there for a day trip, or you can go overnight. Macau's quite interesting. It's sort of like both from a historical perspective, but also it's sort of the Las Vegas of the Far East. So it's quite weird because you'll go and you'll see basically the same buildings run by the same people as you see in Vegas. So you'll see a Wynn and you'll see all that sort of stuff. It's really quite weird, but it's quite fun, the thing. But yeah, 3 days if you're not doing that. But of course, in Hong Kong, if you want to do like the Disneyland and stuff like that, you want to build that in as well. But easily 4 days in Tokyo. And as I mentioned, maybe at the beginning, I will put a link to, I'm sure I've got a blog post about it as well, but I've done these short little things around what I did on a 3-day itinerary, actually, specifically. But then I've been back so I went into a 3-day itinerary, and I've got what you should do day by day, or suggestions, and how it would work. But then I went back last year, and I spent, I think, another 4 days. Was it 4 days or even longer? Where I did a whole bunch of other stuff I hadn't done the first time around, like the Sky Tree and stuff like that. So I will put that in the notes of this. Give me 5 or 10 minutes afterwards, and they should be there. So Hetty's saying there was an article around passport renewal, which is great. France asked me if I'm planning to try Havali. It is on my list. I don't have it booked at the moment. I fully booked up until the end of 27, so it certainly won't be before then, but it is on my absolute definite list. So we've sort of, by discussions above, we sort of answered this. We took a Cunard cruise to Norway last year, loved the country. Are there other more Norway intensive cruise options that are semi-budget friendly? So I can't, often I'm not 100% sure, but take a look at Hurtigruten and Havalia that we mentioned earlier, Havilia, Havila voyages. They have very intensive itineraries, and they do have a wide range of cabins. They are the most intensive way to see Norway. So that is what I would absolutely recommend. Let's have a look. Just a reminder, write the word question. Here we go. I spotted this. No question, but I've spotted your question. Which part of the world would you suggest for a first voyage on an ultra luxury cruise line? So Janet, my initial reaction would be to choose an itinerary that is a little bit exotic. So, whilst it might be fine to do it in the Mediterranean or in the Caribbean, there's no need to really go ultra luxury unless you kind of want the experience, and that's great. I would choose something a little bit more exotic. So, for example, we were talking a little bit about Japan. Japan is a fantastic one to do on an ultra luxury line, or it's sort of a line that's going from Japan somewhere, like someone would say they were going from Japan to Hong Kong, those kind of itineraries, partly because they know the area very well. So like a Regent or Silversea, they know the region very well. And also in some of those ports, like if it is including Shanghai or whatever, you can get right into the heart of the city. But also a lot of them will, if you go say Regent, they include excursions, that anyone that does now, and excursions are quite costly within Japan. So actually, if you're going on a more mainstream line, once you bundle all the costs, you actually find it's not as kind of a disconnect. Also, some of the ultra luxuries do very nice pre and post days, which if you book really early, like on Regent, they will include in the fare. So I would choose something like that, or even like in Australia, some of those slightly more unusual. Alaska may be a good one to do, but you're going to be out in port a lot. So maybe it's something we've got a bit kind of mixture of sea days. So that's one approach. The second approach, which is doing a repositioning cruise on an ultra luxury line, because first of all, it's going to be dramatically cheaper. So for example, I did a repositioning cruise on Silversea from Alaska to Japan. It was costing me half the price per day as it would have cost any other time. So it's a really good way to try ultra luxury. And obviously you need to like sea days, but you're then at sea days, so you're going to have plenty of time to try the food, experiences, the kind of the attention to detail, that kind of stuff. So it's a very good way of trying ultra luxury and a more cost-effective way. So in reality, like over this year and next year, I've booked a number of sort of repositioning cruises on luxury lines because it becomes affordable, but also you can see some quite interesting places. So I'm doing another Alaska, Japan, same new places in Japan, revisiting some of the places in Alaska I haven't been. Again, it's really good pricing. I'm doing a repositioning on Silversea from Papeete. So there's some French Polynesia, parts of Hawaii on to Vancouver. Again, really good value. And I quite like the sea days as well. So those are the two ways. Those are the two ways to go. Lou's completely disappearing with, well, he's sort of agreeing with me. He's saying not the Med, but Japan on that one. So, and I can see why you're saying the Med, particularly if the Med is a new part of the world. So I can understand where Lou is coming from. But we are, someone else recommending, Sheila recommending, also seconding the Avalia place. So that sounds like a really good thing. Maybe I should have rethought where I'm staying this time now. So we have run out of time. There is a couple of questions I haven't got to. I apologize for that. As I said, I will be back. Well, I won't be back here. I'll be back live stream from in Buenos Aires, or going to plan. Note the new time. So it's going to be 4 o'clock Eastern time, 1 o'clock Pacific time, 9 o'clock UK time, or whatever the equivalent is for you. I will have a look at those other questions, see if I can answer those. I did mention I was going to talk about the group cruise. I'll talk about that in more detail next time, and the timing for that, but it is going to be the transatlantic from New York to Southampton, the 23rd to the 30th of July, 2027. And I'll talk next on the group cruise next on the live next week about the timings of that going on sale, and who's going to get priority, and you know, if you want to get priority, what you need to do so it doesn't get sold out, which they often do. So thanks very much. Hopefully I'll have safe travels, which of course these days with everything going on is who knows what's going to happen. But heading in the opposite direction, so hopefully I get to Buenos Aires with no issues. And I will hopefully see you when I'm in Buenos Aires next week on the live stream. Take care, everybody, and thanks for joining.